Washington Journal continues.
Our first guest of the morning is Bill Kristol, the founder and editor of the Weekly Standard. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
5 o'clock this morning, you post an editorial on the Weekly Standard's website. The headline, "The Crisis and the Truth," dealing with the events of the 48 hours. What's the summary?
I think what struck us is that Donald Trump's posts Saturday morning are different from his previous posts. You know, he said things that I think, and my colleagues I think are inappropriate and vulgar and reckless and irresponsible before. But here he's really creating an institutional crisis in the U.S. government. I mean, he's accusing his predecessor of wiretapping him, presumably for political reasons, and inappropriately, based on information that he allegedly had, quote, just found out. Remember the first tweet? I just found out. I wonder how he found that out at 6 a.m. Saturday morning. So that's a serious charge. It's the President of the United States making that charge. He's basically accusing the previous president of using the FBI, one gathers from the context, to get authority to wiretap. The current FBI director was the FBI director then. What does he do? You know, he's impugning the integrity of the FBI, of the FISA court. So I think it's it's different. As I say, it's a little different from when he attacks the media, you know, the failing New York Times, or there are 3 million voters who were fraudulent or whatever. Those are silly things or sometimes irresponsible things. But this really does create a kind of institutional crisis. And so what we call for is quick, open hearings at the highest level, either a congressional select committee, could be the president, could appoint, a very independent committee headed up by very serious people, retired judges, retired attorneys general, to get to the whole truth. What was the Trump-Russia connection? What did the Obama administration do? What is the truth about this whole complex of issues now raised about the 2016 campaign?
And that's aside from the congressional investigations currently taking place, a look at these issues.
I think those are okay, and maybe those can be stepped up and done well, but I would say there's so much partisanship already on those committees, and so many people have already weighed in. You have Devin Nunes, whom I know and rather like, but the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee already giving all kinds of opinions about what's happening. Well, how does he then preside over a serious investigation? What I prefer is, 2 retired attorneys general, 1 from each party, or 2 judges who are on senior status appointed by, Obama and Bush, something like that, highly respected people, to take 60 days and say, let's have full authority to get to the bottom of this. Meanwhile, I think Jim Comey, especially the director of the FBI, needs to say something. I mean, he is the director of our leading federal law enforcement agency. The President of the United States has just accused that agency, under his direction, of basically, for political purposes, abusing the authority they have to pursue counterintelligence inquiries. And I think he needs to speak up today.
And yet he turns to the Justice Department.
Well, he's subordinate. He reports up to the Justice Department, and normally, I remember this when I was in government. I think it's still the case. The FBI director would go to the Justice Department, to the Attorney General, and to the Assistant Attorney General for Public Affairs or whatever, and say, can we put out a statement? But look, I think if Jeff Sessions says, no, I'm sorry, you can't say anything, I think Comey may just say, I'm sorry, I'm going to say something. I mean, if you're an FBI agent, if you're the judge on the FISA court, what does it feel like? Leave aside what it feels like. What lesson is being conveyed to the American public? This is what's so damaging about this. If you're a Republican, you think and if you're a Trump supporter, let me be more precise, you think the previous president used, for political reasons, abused a serious counterintelligence process and a key agency of the U.S. government. If you're not a Trump supporter, you think the current president is recklessly making charges to that effect and calling into question the integrity of the whole process by which we try to pursue counterintelligence investigations. It's a pretty serious matter either way, and it really should be resolved as soon as possible. And in any case, as much sunlight should be shed on it as soon as possible. I think we quote in the editorial, I don't think we give him credit for this, but I think it was Justice Brandeis who said, sunlight is the best as disinfectant. And I really think that would be true right now.
The Crisis and the Truth is the editorial posted this morning on the Weekly Standard website. And Bill Kristol, the founder and editor of the Weekly Standard, joining us to take your calls. Again, 202-748-8000 for Democrats. It's 202-748-8001 for Republicans. And for Independents, 202-748-8002. Our first call for you this morning comes from John. And John is from Maryland, Missouri, calling on our Democrats line. Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Kristol.
Good morning.
A quick statement and then a question for you. December 7th, 1941. September 11th, 2001. January 20th, 2017. Now, my question, since you're a member of the press, and therefore you must be an enemy of the people, how can we trust anything that the Weekly Standard says?
You don't have to trust anything the Weekly Standard says, but you should read the Weekly Standard and make up your own mind and compare it with other sources of news and your own the information you have all around you. So I think we have a good diversity of news outlets in this country, and yeah, the enemy of the people phrase, that is an example of Donald Trump being totally irresponsible in the sense, using a phrase that really is associated with Lenin and with totalitarian regimes to describe members of the media. But again, I don't think it actually gets to the level of irresponsibility of accusing a preceding president, apparently without evidence. If he has evidence, he should produce it, for political reasons, wiretapping his campaign and distorting the institutions of the law enforcement institutions of the U.S. government.
From New Hampshire, Republican line, Jake, hi there.
How are we doing? Yes, with the previous administration, Obama wiretapped all the political leaders across the world, and he was doing things that are far below the level of what he should have did, and I have no confidence in what Obama did, and I do believe that he did wiretap Trump.
Look, if I was not a supporter, at least of President Obama, I must have written God knows how many editorials attacking him criticizing him on every possible policy issue. I voted against him twice, and so forth. But Obama didn't wiretap leaders across the world. The U.S. government wiretapped leaders across the world, and that's something that the Bush administration did as well. And I don't know that President Obama changed that much. But if he tried to do certain things like wiretap for bad reasons, the Republican presidential nominee, again, he can't do that. He has to order people to do that. And so are we really to believe that the people in the FBI and CIA, layers down, were complicit in this kind of conspiracy? Or was his White House so clever that they fooled the FBI into thinking something was so that wasn't so? That's where this is really a crisis. I mean, if you think about it for a minute, what people who think, quote, Obama wiretapped Trump really are saying is that the FBI, at least, was complicit. Jim Comey was the director of the FBI. Jim Comey is now director of the FBI. Right there, that's a kind of institutional crisis that needs to be addressed, I think.
So even if we go down the road of investigations like you would say, do you think people would ultimately accept these things and these resolves, or at least these crises would be resolved?
Well, one problem with having a kind of president who does indulge in conspiracy theories, and again, I'm a huge critic of Barack Obama, and I was not a fan of Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, though I supported him. I voted for him twice. I had a lot of problems with the way he did some things too. In none of those cases, though, did we have a president who indulged in conspiracy theories and really fed them. And I do think that creates an unhealthy dynamic in the body politic. This goes way back to the birth certificate of President Obama and so forth. And therefore people will say, oh, that's just another cover. It's a cover-up. It's a conspiracy. Now, I think, luckily, it's a free country. Our institutions are pretty strong. And that's the one thing that does reassure me. I do think Congress is Congress. The courts are the courts. The FBI is the FBI. 98% of the people in the FBI are not going to do illegal things knowingly. They're not going to, for political reasons, follow an order that comes from the White House. I don't believe James Comey is going to do this. He may have used bad judgment at times. The irony is, just 3-4 months ago, he was the guy Democrats were complaining about who elected Donald Trump by releasing the information that he was reopening the investigation of Hillary Clinton, 10 days before the election. Now he's the guy that suddenly Republicans are complaining about because they think he might have done this at President Obama's behest. But it is bad for the country to have this level of conspiracy theorizing. And that's why I do think just shining a spotlight on it, explaining what happened, I think the truth will end up being much less. I don't believe that the Federal Bureau of Investigation or the FISA court were complicit in a politically motivated investigation. They may have investigated certain people associated with the Trump campaign for ties to Russia, or they may have, in the course of eavesdropping quite appropriately on foreign government officials or foreign agents, have come across connections with the Trump campaign. Those connections might have been serious. They might have been kind of innocent or trivial, you know. But again, I do think we now need to know all that. Now, it's a problem because when you're dealing with foreign intelligence, counterintelligence, you don't want to reveal what you know. Some of these are ongoing legal investigations. They're ongoing intelligence inquiries. But I would err now on the side of I think what we called it in the editorial, this was my colleague Steve Hayes' phrase, radical transparency. I think that it's enough of a crisis of confidence in the country, enough of an institutional crisis that we need to maybe give up a little bit on these sort of strictly, oh, it's an ongoing investigation, or oh, we can't discuss something that's part of the intelligence inquiry. Kind of, we have to give up a little bit of that, I think, and say, here's what happened. The public needs to be reassured that we have some sense of where we are.
At Democrats Line, Jackson, Mississippi. Ruth, hello.
Hi, how are you today?
Fine, thanks.
I know that it's so hard for the people out here that's not experienced in these things to think whatever they want to think. Now, they so caught up into Trump era and what Trump is putting out there, and he says anything that he wants to say, and people tend to believe what he say, and that's why we have such a problem. Now, if Obama had said some stuff like he said, it would have been a catastrophe. He accused him of not being American. He accusing everybody of stuff. Whenever he gets in a hole, he fights his way out by digging up dirt on other people. But people don't have a problem with that. They have a problem with the truth. And the truth will set you free, and it's going to come out sooner or later. Thank you.
Well, I agree that the truth should come out, and I think it will come out, but it will come out faster if we have a real serious bipartisan investigation of it, I think. I do think it's something to the point that, I mean, Donald Trump, I mean, I'm a Republican. I voted for every Republican since I was 18 years old.
Including Mr. Trump?
No, not including Mr. Trump. He's the first I couldn't vote for. And that was really, the caller's point was really the reason that, you know, you could agree or disagree with Clinton, Bush, Obama, all these other people running for president. But Trump does sort of indulge in a kind of rhetoric and a kind of conspiracy theorizing, a kind of something that really, I think, warps the political system in a way that all these other presidents haven't. Now, I had hoped when he became president, president-elect, that might change. And there were some indications that some of his appointments were very good. And I thought, well, maybe the Trump administration will be okay, even if Trump himself is a little bit questionable as a president. Then he becomes president, and you think, okay, maybe he's going to get serious. And then he gives a decent speech to Congress last week. You think, oh, finally, maybe. People were all saying, oh, finally, the Trump presidency has begun. I really am worried now. I mean, in the sense that he's going to be president for either for 4 years or until he leaves office voluntarily or is removed from office, obviously. And I don't think that's likely, at least in the very near future. And, you know, is he, I guess one of the things that most spooks me, if I can put it this way, is he doesn't seem to have internalized the fact that he's president of the United States. I mean, it's just whatever. Again, Clinton, Bush, all these guys. Once they were in the Oval Office, it was, I've got to be different. I can't. Things I could say as a candidate, and even when you're a candidate, you should be a little more careful for president. Things I can say as a candidate, I can't say now. I can't speculate on intelligence matters, on who's wiretapping whom. I should be sort of dignified in the way I conduct the office. Most of the time, they all had lapses. They all said things in private that then got out that they probably regretted. But Trump just seems not even to have the notion that being president is different from being a private citizen, a businessman, a troublemaker, a TV reality host, someone sitting here with you talking freely and speculating. It's just different, you know, and that's what worries me about him as president. I think that's why he as president can do a fair amount of damage to the system. Having said that, I think the institutions are strong and will overcome this particular problem one way or the other. And we could end up with some policies that I agree with and some agencies of the government that are well run, you know, the Defense Department and so forth. So I don't think everything is dark. But I do think this that tweet storm Saturday morning showed, this is 6 weeks into having been president, showed a sort of lack of understanding of what his role is. That's worrisome.
And then this week, the travel ban expected. This week also Republicans expected to act on health care. Does this overshadow all that?
It may, but
ultimately,
I mean,
an agenda for the Republicans.
I mean, in a way, that's reassuring if we could just get back to business and have normal arguments about, you know, visa policy and immigration policy and healthcare policy. That would be what the system is supposed to have, and then you can have better or worse arguments. But I think it will overshadow it. But in some way, those people who are saying, well, if only, okay, now we can get off this silly stuff onto the agenda, but really calling into question the probity of the FBI director and whether the FBI has been politicized is more serious than the details of the Republican health care proposal. So or even perhaps on the executive order if they do a revised one today. So I think we'll have people can do a lot of things at once. You know, Nixon spent 1973, 74 getting himself driven from office, and at the same time he conducted foreign policy, and Kissinger did things, and Jim Schlesinger did things, and there were economic debates. It's not like the whole world stops if there's a kind of institutional crisis of the kind we have. But yeah, I do think I think the sort of sophisticated view that, well, there's this nonsense going on with Trump, but then the serious people are focused on health care. I don't really believe that. The most serious issue we have right now is the basic trust in our institutions of government.
From Arkansas, this is Charles on our Republican line.
Good morning. By the way, Bill, who's going to take responsibility when we're attacked by someone? Because the newspapers, Comey did Clinton lie and Loretta Lynch lie when they met. Is the Ninth Circuit Court going to take responsibility? Is Comey, is the ACLU now that's going to sue our president? Are they going to stand up and say, we're sorry? People are going to become dead over this stupid thing. There has never been any proof that anybody in the the Trump group actually committed any crimes by contacting Russia, if they did or not. But who's going to stand up and say, I'm sorry that we held back all these items that have to be done to protect this country?
Thanks, caller.
Look, I agree there's no proof that that Trump committed any crimes or that his senior advisors did, and I don't think I've never said they did, and I don't think most responsible people have said they did. There are things that probably should be investigated, and they are being investigated by congressional committees. Those committees are chaired by Republicans, so I don't think they're going to be unfair investigations. But there are things that should be looked into. There were unusual aspects of the campaign and of Trump's team's connections with Russia. Trump himself let his national security advisor go, partly over Russia-related matters. So that's worth looking into. But yeah, I agree. No one should accuse anyone of a crime without having evidence. I mean, on the executive order, it may be that the various tightening up of certain requirements that Trump tried to do in his first week was important to fight terrorism. It's not clear that it was. Lots of terrorism experts think this is pretty marginal and trivial and even of a distraction, maybe even counterproductive at times. Trump said it's extremely urgent, had to do it right away. And then the thing got struck down in court, and now it's taken him 4 or 5 weeks to propose a substitute. So meanwhile, people have been coming in the way they were. It's not like people were flooding in from these countries. They need a visa. They get interviewed. Maybe it should be tightened. Maybe a few countries should be shut down entirely. I'm not sure Iraq is one of them, a country that we've been fighting in and whose soldiers we've been fighting with, and who have been, a lot of whom have been, fighting and dying with us. The idea that some translator for American troops is going to be denied entry I don't think is appropriate. But anyway, we should have a policy debate on that. We shouldn't have a debate where if you're on one side, you're accused of, helping terrorists or wishing to help terrorists. And again, there's a lot of evidence. There are a lot of serious people who thought a lot about this issue. But we'll see what happens. I would say generally on immigration, I'm not that liberal on immigration, and I'm certainly pretty hawkish on the war on terror, and I've always defended pretty aggressive U.S. government actions, including the National Security Agency and the wiretapping and stuff that some of my libertarian and conservative friends don't like. So I'm sort of a hawk on the war on terror, and I'm not that liberal on immigration policy because I think there's a reasonable case for cutting back a little bit. But some of what's happening, I think, is not going to be popular. I mean, with these raids and separating families, and it shouldn't be popular. So again, here's one problem if you're a conservative. What Trump is going to do is going to discredit conservative arguments. There are serious conservative arguments that we need to rethink. Well, everyone thinks we need to rethink immigration one way or the other. And there are some conservative arguments about restricting some lower wage immigration. I'm not sure I agree with them, but they're serious policy arguments. There are serious arguments about what you do about the 11 million people who seem to be here without documents. And I think Obama deported some people. Obviously, everyone thinks people who commit crime should be deported, et cetera. So, or almost everyone. But again, Trump is doing everything in such a ham-handed way that I think he will discredit the conservative arguments that that don't deserve to be discredited necessarily, and leave conservatives much worse off, and Republicans actually worse off as a result of what he's trying to do.
From New Jersey, this is Maria, Independent Line.
Yes, good morning. I have a couple of points to make, if you don't mind. First of all, Mr. Kristol said it was unthinkable to question the intelligence agencies. I'd like to remind him that Mr. Clapper lied under oath about surveillance of citizens. Schumer threatened President Trump with the intelligence agency's revenge. Loretta Lynch met with President Clinton before all of the brouhaha came out, and nobody's brought her to task seriously. I also want to make a comment that it really isn't a question of parties. It's a question of the globalist establishment and wanting their little wars, wanting no borders for our country. And nobody's looked into President Obama's records yet. He hasn't been vetted yet. And the Globe had an article that the Clintons had been put under a grand jury in December, and that actually Hillary Clinton tried to leave the country. Now, either that's true or that's false. Look into that. I think people have to fast and pray and believe in the goodness of the people of this country. And I'm tired of the snark and the smears of the neocons. I want them to just go away. Thank you.
I think if you believe in the goodness of the people of this country, that includes those of us who are called neocons. And look, all these things should be looked into. I don't know that Hillary Clinton's fleeing the country or anything like that, but if some reputable news organization has reason to believe that, they should report that. I mean, look, it's unfortunate. Of course, intelligence agencies make mistakes, and I'm not going to defend every single person who's run an intelligence agency either. That's why we have congressional oversight. That's why we have media investigations. I don't believe that the FBI would go about a politicized investigation of Trump. Again, Jim Comey's the guy who released the letter about Hillary Clinton 10 days out. I don't think the FBI has usually been viewed as a hotbed of friends of Clinton, or for that matter, even of the Obama administration. But I'm not a defender of the policies of the Obama administration. I think one can say that there are people who just differ on policy. They all wish the best for the country. Most people who go into government do so because they want to advance policies they think are good for the country. Most people in the intelligence field, and I've worked with a lot of these people and know these people, maybe that just makes me a part of the globalist establishment, they actually work pretty hard to try to keep the country safe and to advance the interests of the country. And you know what? They've done a pretty good job. They've done a pretty good job. How many attacks have there been here, successful attacks since 9/11? There have been some, obviously, and some people were let in who probably shouldn't have been, or the FBI should have deported them after the first meeting instead of sending them the information back to the local police or so forth. And we can think of cases in Boston and Orlando. These are cases that Trump's travel visa change, incidentally, would not have affected, So that's one reason why serious people look at that and think, well, is that the right thing to do, of all the things you could do to tighten up our counterterrorism efforts? But the people involved in this have worked pretty hard since 9/11. And as I say, I think we owe them quite a lot. And one of the things I dislike most about all this globalist establishment rhetoric is, fine, attack Clapper. I have no reason to defend him. But don't attack all the people working there. And if these conspiracy theories sort of imagine that the entire CIA or FBI is hopping to it to do things they shouldn't be doing. And that's not the people I know who've worked at the FBI or the CIA.
On that front, this is Sandy off of Twitter this morning. He starts by saying, Mr. Kristol, your naivete is staggering. Just who do you think that's leaking daily from the state and the Justice Department against Trump, adding it's Obama loyalist?
That could be. That could be. And they shouldn't leak. On the other hand, have any of these leaks done damage to our national security? These leaks have been hostile, perhaps, to the new Trump administration. That happens. That's happened in the past. That happened when Reagan took over, and there were Carter people leaking against him and so forth. I'm sure Obama felt there were people in the Pentagon who gave accounts of meetings he had early on who were left over from the Bush administration, or were loyalists who believed in the war in Iraq, as I did and do, and who didn't like the fact that President Obama was getting us out of there and stuff. But again, there are leaks often in Washington, as you know, and there are leaks when a new administration takes over. And if there are serious national security implications of those leaks, people should be investigated and prosecuted. I would say it's a general matter. Leak investigations are not a good idea. You start going down that rabbit hole and you end up sort of getting yourself in more trouble than you do the leakers. That's what Nixon. It's very important to remember, it's useful to remember that Watergate began with a leak investigation. Why were they breaking into those offices, right? To put in bugs, and why? Why? Because they thought they wanted to discover who was leaking stuff. The Plumbers was the name of the group that Nixon put together to stop the leaks. So that's I just think it's a practical matter. Even if the leaks are annoying, I was in government, they really can be annoying. You're probably better off doing your business. You know what? If there were all the leaks in the world, if Donald Trump has a successful foreign policy, if Donald Trump repeals and replaces Obamacare, if his economic policies lead to economic growth, if he keeps the country safe, it's not going to really matter that there are all these leaks. And that's what's sort of crazy about it. Trump will be judged. He's in office for 4 years. He's been in 6 weeks. He'll be judged by the results of his policies. From his own point of view, and I think some of his aides know this, it's really nuts for him to be obsessing about what Hillary Clinton did or even what President Obama did. What does it matter? Let's just assume, I don't believe this is true, but let's assume Obama somehow arranged for Comey to improperly or shaded the law to wiretap some people in October at Trump Tower. So what? Trump's president, right? I mean, you know, these wiretaps haven't emerged. No one has done anything with them. There have been some leaks, but those have sort of come and gone so far as there's no evidence behind them. If there's evidence, that's another question, but then if there's evidence, there's evidence. That's something you have to deal with. But if it's all phony, if it's all fake, there's nothing there, the smoke will blow away in a day, maybe a week. It's slightly annoying to get up and see some article that's thinly sourced on the front page of the Washington Post and New York Times. And you go ahead and you pass your Obamacare replacement, and you go ahead and you pass your economic package, and you go ahead and run a serious foreign and national security policy, and you'll be fine. So even from his own point of view, it's crazy for him to be obsessing about this.
Bill Kristol from the Weekly Standard joining us. Michael from Atlanta, Georgia, Democrats line.
Hey, good morning. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Now, what's up, Pedro? Now, I ain't going to waste too much air on Mr. Kristol, no disrespect intended. But, I mean, what I'm concerned about is we sit here and watch all day. During the election, C-SPAN had every right-winger you could think of to throw out conspiracy about Hillary Clinton and everything. Now, we got serious conspiracies going on with this administration, and all C-SPAN is doing is putting Republicans on to give us bubble talk about nothing. The President of the United States said that, as a veteran, really upsets me, that our president, prior to that, wiretapped his office. We had mass voter frauds. I mean, these conspiracies are on the lines of the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. I mean, we need some serious journalism going on, and C-SPAN needs to put on people like Mother Jones, the Young Turks, somebody like that to give voice and not bringing on these right-wingers who had no problem running after every conspiracy they could find on Hillary, Bill Clinton, Obama, even though they couldn't find anything.
Well, just to say, you've mentioned two of those, and both representatives have been on this program over the course of time. I'll just add that, but finish your thought.
I mean, you say over the course of time, it's 365 days in a year. So you bring them on 2 days and right-wingers the other 363 days to spread nonsense?
That's not true at all, but we'll leave it at that. Let's go to Louise. And Louise is in Fredericksburg, Virginia, Republican line. Hi.
Good morning. First off, I'm not a fan of Bill Kristol. I wasn't a fan of his father either. But let's stick to the facts. There were 17 intelligence agencies that came out in December saying that, yes, Russia hacked, but they didn't say that they hacked the emails of Podesta. They did not say that. What they did imply was that there was a propaganda war, that Russia influenced the election, may have influenced the election through the RT, Russian television, which I happen to like. They have a lot of different things about the world as compared to CNN, NBC, and all those others that only stick to Trump. But the right wing, the extreme right, which is you are, you're very upset that you're afraid that President Trump is not going to do your bidding, and you are absolutely obsolete. So let's stick with the facts. So what I'd like to say is I trust James Comey I trust the FBI. I absolutely do. I've known different FBI agents. They're very good people, and honestly, they're fair and honest, and I trust them just like I do the state police. But what you're doing with your opposition to Trump, and you and the left wing are joining together, you don't want to change the system. The system suits you fine, and you need to just go away. But I want to say,
caller, we'll leave it there.
Well, I'm glad you trust James Comey and the FBI. Even James Comey, though I respect him, I wouldn't trust him blindly. But it's Donald Trump who attacked him Saturday morning, not me. So your problem is with Donald Trump, A. And B, yeah, I disagree with Donald Trump on some things. I don't expect him to do my bidding. It's a free country. We're allowed to agree or disagree with him. So I'm happy to agree where I can. I want to agree with the Republican nominee. I tend to agree with many of his policies. I admire many of his appointments. But all this talk about changing the system and, people like me want to keep it the way it is. It's just, honestly, it's simple-minded. Of course, I want to change some things, and I want to keep some other things mostly the way they are, like having a free country, having free media, having a president who behaves in a dignified way in office. Those aren't bad things. And this country isn't in horrible shape, incidentally. People who've worked in government for the last 40 years haven't failed in every respect. So I think a president who wants to change some things but also wants to defend what deserves to be defended is a good thing. All this drain the swamp talk, and it's fun, it's nice, it's exciting. Of course, Trump isn't doing that at all, right? He's proposing the exact same size spending in the federal government as President Obama did. Tiny, small increase, 3% increase in the military, some cuts that the liberals will go crazy about, some of which I'll support, in domestic agencies, but basically no touching of entitlements. So Mr. Change is going to submit a budget that's going to have the exact same top line number as President Obama. Mr. Change has put a bunch of rich guys and billionaires in his cabinet. He's got Reince Priebus, I like Reince, the chairman of the RNC as his chief of staff. That's real huge change, right? And a lot of other people who've been in government a long time, which is probably the way it has to be. It's always going to be that way in government to some degree. You're going to get people who've been in before. He's proposing some policies I agree with. Obamacare replacement, that's a plan that was developed by a lot of people. I worked with some of them, people we published. I wrote a lot about this in the Weekly Standard to replace Obamacare, so that's good. That's the kind of change I would like to see. But again, let's see if he can do it. That takes hard work. That takes hard work. And his administration so far has probably damaged the prospects for the kind of legislative changes, serious changes. Also, what about institutional reform? I am for that. We shouldn't just leave things the way they've been for the chances for years or decades. Are the chances for institutional reform greater or less when we have a president who's so reckless in all of his charges that everyone just says, well, geez, if the alternative is just kind of blowing everything up, we better stick with what we've got. And that is where the American public are going to end up. That is where, if Trump goes down this road, he's going to lose more support. This is not going to work. And we're going to end up with a failed administration.
Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard. The latest on the website, The Crisis and the Truth, is the editorial posted this morning. Mr. Kristol, thanks for your time.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Coming up, we'll hear from Timothy Snyder. He's a Yale history professor, also the author of the book on tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. And later on in the program, it's our regular Your Money segment. We will take a look at the cost related to President Trump's travel to Florida and the protection costs for his family as well. Washington Journal continues after this.